Today we jump back to our NHL offseason plan series and we're looking at the fourth-ranked team from the NHL's regular season, the Toronto Maple Leafs. They should be a fascinating team to watch as they have a ton of expiring contracts. This team could look very different going into next year. Will the core four return? Who will the supporting cast be? We'll discuss all we know and what's going to likely coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we're looking at the offseason plan for the Toronto Maple Leafs, the fourth-ranked team from the regular season. Of course, they won a first-round series against the Tampa Bay Lightning, so they broke the first-round curse. Unfortunately, fell in round 2 against the Florida Panthers, and now they have a lot of questions facing them here yet again. So in case you're new to this series, we're going to quickly recap last season's key stats, take a look at all the moves they made, look at their cap space, expiring contracts, and there's a ton of those on the UFA side. Feels like half the team, or including some players that are kind of up and down between NHL and AHL, are pending UFAs. Then we'll discuss one of the top burning questions facing this team this offseason. So let's first recap last season. Like I said, they were fourth best team in the league, 111 points, 50 wins, 21 losses, 11 overtime losses. That's a really solid regular season campaign. All the key team metrics we look at were all really solid as well. They scored 279 goals for 9th best, allowed 222 for 7th best, had the second best power play in the NHL with 26% success rate, and they killed penalties well at 81.9% for 12th best. So really they're a top 10 scoring and defending team, top 2 power play team, 12th in the PK. Like, you can't really put a lot of negative spin on that. There's a lot of good things happening overall in the regular season. Lots of great things happening. Of course, they had a very busy deadline. GM Kyle Dubas went out and added a lot. They kind of got ahead of the 8 ball a little bit early, and they acquired Ryan O'Reilly and Nola Cherry from the St. Louis Blues. Then they pulled off a big trade with Chicago and picked up Jake McKeeb and Sam Lafferty. And then towards the actual deadline, they picked up Luke Shen and Eric Gustafsson. So they added a lot. That's 3 defensemen and 3 forwards. I mean, I know personally I wondered how much that might mess with the team chemistry. Would it have an impact? But they get the job done in the first round. I think they were really focused because they knew they were playing Tampa for a long time. The way the NHL regular season standings were going, they knew well ahead that Tampa would be their opponent. Just a matter of making sure they got home ice advantage, which they did by a good margin. So ultimately, they prepared and went at this deadline preparing to beat Tampa, and they succeeded. But they didn't know that they were going to run into an upstart Florida Panther team with a really hot goalie who would kind of ruin things and stop it at one series victory. I don't think too many people predicted that, but Matthew Tkachuk, Sergei Bobrovsky, and the Florida Panthers had other things in mind for the Eastern Conference this year, like I said, that were just unpredictable. So we ended up, like I said, a series win for the first time in 19 years. They broke that, which felt like a curse. They did, like I said, lose around 2, unfortunately, 4 games to 1. Not only did they not win the series, but it wasn't close. I mean, most of the games were close. But Florida always found a way to come out on top, except for one time. Kyle Dubas ended up getting relieved of his duties in the midst of a contract dispute, negotiation, whatever you want to call it. He's dismissed. Brad Treliving, who had previously left the Calgary Flames earlier in the offseason, is hired as a new GM. That's where things sit here today. There's a lot. That's going to be more questions, which we'll get into here momentarily. Cap-wise, they're not in the greatest spot because, as we've known for some time, they do have a lot of money tied up in their top 4 or 5 players. They have $74.35 million tied up already in salary cap space. They have 15 NHL contracts out of a maximum of 23 on their NHL roster and on the books for next year or beyond right now. So that leaves potentially upwards of 8 roster contract spots open. Now, the Leafs in the past number of years have been so tight to the cap, they typically don't carry a 23-man roster. Usually you're looking at 21, sometimes 22. So you're probably looking at more like 6 to 7 roster spots that they need to be concerned about. They have just over $9 million available, but they do have the contract of Jake Muzzin for another season. Jake Muzzin has already been confirmed to not play anymore. He has $5.6 million cap hit, which can go on long-term injured reserve and essentially extend their salary cap reach to be, now 14.7 or so $million range. So just shy of $14.8 million. So that's with LTIR completely maxed out. Ideally, they probably not want to be in that predicament, but at the same time, at least it's there. that they can work with for another year. Now, what's the internal business? What are the expiring contracts do we have? Like I said, it's a lot. On the UFA side, this is the biggest list we've had in this series thus far, and probably will be once we're finished. But let's start first with the short list of restricted free agents, which include goalie Ilya Samsonov, defenseman Victor Mete, and forward Pontus Holmberg. Holmberg did get to see some action earlier before the deadline. Once the deadline came, and all the extra bodies like O'Reilly, Cherry, Lafferty, they kind of bumped him down the depth chart and sent him back down to be an extra or play with the Marlies. So things could change next year. I know he did have a decent showing. I'm sure that Samsonov and Holmberg will be qualified. I have my doubts on Victor Mete. Wouldn't be shocked if he's not offered a qualifying offer and he walks via UFA. The last few years, he's bounced around to a few teams that has not been able to stick. I really don't know what the future holds for Mete in the NHL. It's hard to say. But this list for UFAs is ridiculously long, with the top names being Ryan O'Reilly and Noel Acciari, who they acquired from the Blues at the deadline. Michael Bunting, of course, who, a homegrown product from Scarborough. Played in basically the top six for a long time, was with Matthews in the past couple of years, scoring 23 goals a season. Word is he's looking for $5 to $6 million per season, and he's likely not returning based on just that they don't have the room. O'Reilly, I know there's interest and talks for O'Reilly and the Leafs to reunite, but again, it's going to boil down to dollars, and it's going to be complicated. I'm not sure. Acciari, I haven't heard much about him as of yet. I think there's some mutual interest there, but hard to say how much. Zach Aston Reese is another forward, bottom six guy. He likely departs, at least I think so. David Kampf, as I know with Chris Johnson, I mentioned as soon as their season was over, that Kampf might be one of the bottom six guys that might be more likely to return. But again, boils down to money. Difficult to say, especially now that there's a new GM in place. And remember, a lot of the intel we heard on the Leafs when the season first ended, especially where Chris Johnson's probably one of the more plugged-in insiders on the Leafs. This was before the Dubas stuff happened and before that contract became messy and before he was dismissed. So we don't know how Brad Treliving is going to feel about things and could have a different approach here. Alex Kerfoot, another UFA, pretty much given I think that he's gone. Wayne Simmons was a spare part the past couple of years. I think it's fair to say that the Wayne train will ride out of Toronto. He's played his final game there. I'm not sure if he'll be able to continue his career or not, but if he does, it won't be with the Leafs. Defenseman Eric Gustafsson, Justin Hall, Luke Shen, and Jordy Ben, all UFAs. In Group 6 UFA goaltender Eric Shalgren. Now, Shalgren's had spot duty in the NHL the past couple of years. At this point, though, I don't know that he has an NHL future. I mean, maybe they keep him around to play with the Marlies. I'm not sure. But I think it's fair to say Joseph Wall has shown he can be NHL capable. So that's kind of, pushed Shalgren down to the depth chart. And we'll see what happens. I don't think Shalgren returns. Out of the four defensemen, I think the only one that has a chance is Luke Shen. There have been some reports on Shen and the Leafs, and Shen have mutual interest to get a contract done for him to stay. But right now, it's they've been talking for some time. No deal yet. There's some reporters seem confident they'll get it done. Others feel like it's maybe less likely the longer it drags on, and maybe they just can't accommodate what he's looking for. I would imagine at this stage of his career, he might want multi-years. Maybe he wants too much of a raise. I don't know. I know he played well, and I think the coaching staff was happy with him. I think there's, like I said, a lot of mutual interest to stay. Just a matter of they can figure out the logistics and the term and money, and they are talking. So there's a chance that Luke Shen returns. So that's a long, long list. Like they said, we don't know what we're going to talk about in the next segment here, and the questions part of it is, will we see any big important pieces move out of Toronto, which is what a lot of people talk about as soon as the season ended. They lost against the Panthers, but they have a lot of holes to fill between their bottom six and some depth pieces on the blue line. So a lot of those spots kind of up for grabs. But as far as the top burning questions facing the Toronto Maple Leafs, for one, which we think we know the answer to, so we'll start with an easy one, is who's the coach? Is Sheldon Keefe and the coaching staff going to return? And it appears that the answer is yes. At this point, if Sheldon Keefe has not been announced to be let go, I'd be shocked if Brad Treliving and Brendan Shanahan come out and said that they're not going to keep Keefe around. To me, that would have taken way too long and would be completely just unprofessional to take that much time and for him to lose out on chances to go elsewhere by doing that. But at this point, the rumor has it that he's definitely staying. The other thing that leads us to believe he's staying is that there's been some talk that Treliving and Keefe have met together to interview for new assistant coaches. So he wouldn't be involved in that if he wasn't sticking around. Clearly, they did lose Spencer Carberry, one of the assistant coaches who ran the power play, worked with the forwards. He's now a head coach of the Capitals organization. So they do need to replace him. And there have been some ongoing interviews regards to that. I would think a guy like Todd Nelson, who just won the Calder Cup for the second time as a head coach with the Hershey Bears, is a prime candidate. I would like to think maybe they might take a look at Bruce Boudreau too, but I know there's been a long rumor every time there's an opening in Toronto about Boudreau because he's a great coach, a long history in the NHL of having great success, and he's a huge Leaf fan. Deep down inside, that's where he grew up, and of course, in Ontario, playing for the Leafs many moons ago. But I don't know the connection if that'll work out. But it looks as though Sheldon Keefe is going to return. Just a matter of who completes his bench staff with him. Of course, we get the Austin Matthews and William Nylander contracts. Those are by far the two biggest contract negotiations and questions kind of looming over this franchise right now. On July 1, Matthews gets a no trade clause that kicks in. And if they didn't, I don't think they have any intention of wanting to move him. But if contract negotiations, for example, went awry and they something unexpected happened, they would have no leverage, and it's kind of a risky spot to be in. But things are trending right now that if they do get a deal done with Matthews, and it's expected that they will, that's going to be after July 1st. So he's going to hold all the cards and probably get whatever he wants by the sounds of things. I mean, I don't know. I mean, most insiders say that he doesn't want to do an 8-year term. I know there's been some push from the Leafs to see if they can convince him to do that, but it's looking like it's probably going to be somewhere in the 3 to 5 range. And it's probably going to be at least $13 million, if not more. And to me, we're getting to the point where they need to talk to him about leaving some money on the table here for the rest of the team. Otherwise, they're going to have a tough time, retaining their window here for cup contention, I think, because they have a lot of money tied up now with these top guys. If they tie up even more, it's challenging. It's not that he's not worth the money. It's just that you got to surround yourself with a strong enough supporting cast, and that's challenging with the amount of money that's tied up in these guys. With Nylander, of course, we know that his previous negotiation went really long, right to the 11th hour. Was we had a situation where he withheld services and missed several months, came back, had a struggle. It was a bad scenario. Now, over time, the contract's proven to be really good, but in the beginning, it wasn't. And I think the Leafs are a little nervous here that if the Nylander's coming back wanting, let's say he wants 10 and a half, maybe he wants a little bit more closer to the Marner number, and then you got Matthews wanting 13 to 14. That's a lot of money. As much as they don't want to go down the road of a trade with these guys, that would be a reason that might lead to it. I know Elliot Friedman today in his 32 Thoughts podcast made mention of William Nylander. If he wants too much money, like if the negotiations don't go well, he's curious and wonders if that could lead to a trade. He thinks otherwise. The word is that the core 4 guys, when your top 4 forwards with Matthews, Marner, Tavares, and Nylander, they'll all be back as long as something doesn't go really bad on negotiations with Matthews and Nylander, with Nylander being the more likely one to maybe run into problems here, I guess, if he's looking for too much money. So we'll have to see. That's the only thing that I think will lead to a trade. But at this point, those 2 contracts, by far the 2 biggest questions facing this team. And can they leave enough money on the table to round out then good supporting help? Now, another big one as well is the future of Matt Murray. Is he going to play? Is he going to be bought out? Is he going to get traded and given like an incentive to take the contract off their hands? And right now, we're a number of days into the buyout window. A buyout has not been processed as of yet. I know it's, I believe Elliot Friedman said today as well, as of today, things can always change. It's not looking like a buyout's going to happen for the final year of his contract. So if that doesn't happen, are they going to move him? I just don't see how they can re-sign Samsonov and go with Samsonov and Murray. That doesn't make sense. To me, Joseph Woll was by far the better goalie. And he comes way cheaper. If they can move Murray for the final year, it gives them more cap flexibility to get the other supporting cast looked after and have much better quality help there. So we'll see. But the future of Murray is certainly a big question facing this team. Of course, counting Matthew Nyes, like I said, counting the youngster of Nyes, who is on his rookie contract, they only have 7 forward side. You've got the big 4, and then you've only got a couple more guys. So that's a lot of spots open in a 12 forward group. I mean, that's 5 roster spots within forwards. And like I said, you've got O'Reilly, Cherry, Bunting, Astor, Reese, Kerfoot, all UFAs. And you might bring back one or two, maybe. Like, if O'Reilly comes back, I mean, he might come back for a bit of a deal, but it's still not going to be super cheap. Camp, I don't know, might be doable. But, like, they have some spots to fill. They're going to have to go shopping for some quality depth for cheap if they can find it. That's been the challenge year after year in Toronto. And for the most part, they've been able to do a pretty good job with it. But, that's the issue there. There is rumors that they are looking to kind of maybe rebuild the blue line. I personally suspect that Treliving is going to put a bigger focus on the D than the forwards. I know that the two big negotiations for extensions are a couple of your top forwards there, obviously, in Matthews and Nylander. But I believe Treliving, that this seems to be his approach that we've based on his history. I think it's fair to say that building the blue line is where he's going to put his focus first, and getting Morgan Rielly some better quality help back there. So it wouldn't be shocking if he tries to make a trade or two to kind of reshape the blue line, although they did that last year and the numbers were good. But obviously they did have some struggles in the playoffs. Like, it's fair to say that guys like Jordan Ben, Justin Hall, Eric Gustafsson won't be back. I think it's fair to say a guy like Timothy Logan might be able to get a bigger role. You got obviously Rielly. You still got Brody for another year. Giordano's signed, but you could tell he struggled through the playoffs. I think it's maybe Gio needs to play less next year and be more of a number 7 guy. He can kind of come in and out of the lineup, so he's not kind of getting burnt out by playoff time. They definitely have a lot of work to do. Lots of spots. Quality depth for cheap is not going to be an easy find, because this UFA group this year is also not the greatest. So lots of questions around the roster in that front for sure. Like I said, this team could look extremely different next year. The supporting cast could be very different. Treliving is going to have his work cut out for him. Like I said, and you got the no boat clause is kicking in here as well for Matthews and for Marner. Of course, Marner is still signed longer, but if they were going to do anything, now would be the time before July 1. I don't think they want to do that, but still, it's going to be extremely challenging to bring back everybody without something significant changing. That's why I do really wonder if they did move anybody into core 4. I think most people agree at this point. Not that he's the worst player by any means, but I think Nylander makes the most sense given where his next contract's going. And he had a big year. He's got a tough agent who's been notorious for doing tough deals. So it's not going to be easy at all. This team could look extremely different next season, and I'd be curious to see where they go. Let me know your thoughts on how the Leafs will be different next year. What moves do you expect from them this offseason? Will a core 4 member be traded? Who comes back next year? Let's talk about it in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe, stick around, keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.